Depending on the methods used, manipulation can be divided into direct and indirect. Direct manipulation is the most primitive tactic used by representatives of the elite, whereby specific requirements and conditions are set out that consumers must meet in order to continue using the products of those elite corporations. Indirect manipulation is a more sophisticated tactic used by the elite, whereby people are influenced in indirect ways to make them do things that benefit the elite. For example, representatives of the elite may be attempting to buy over various government agencies through bribes or other means in order to pass certain amendments to laws or decrees that are beneficial to the elite. Distraction tactics may also be used, where events that attract the attention of many people are deliberately provoked. And while people are busy analyzing them and neutralizing the negative consequences, the elite can quietly and freely do whatever they want without being noticed. Depending on the means used, manipulation can be divided into physical and emotional. Physical manipulation refers to methods that directly exert physical or psychological effect using a certain type of energy that interacts with the human body to artificially alter its behavior in order to carry out the demands of the elite. For example, electromagnetic or other types of radiation of a certain frequency can be generated, which coincides with the vibrational frequency of certain areas of the brain, and then, by increasing the strength of the electromagnetic field, it could be possible to suppress the activity of those areas of the brain, making it difficult for a person to concentrate and preventing him from developing effective tactics to free himself from the influence of the elite. Similarly, using space satellites or other means capable of emitting radiation that affects the human brain, it is possible to adjust the frequencies, intensity, and combinations of radiation to force the brain to artificially generate certain thoughts that would not arise under natural conditions. Every sensation that is formed in the brain when the sensory organs react to various environmental factors, as well as every memory aspect recorded in the cerebral cortex, and every thought and emotion has its own specific code, i.e., specific configurations of the quantity, frequency, and intensity of nerve impulses. Thus, by examining the system according to which these configurations are generated in the brain, or by determining which specific configurations encode certain thoughts favorable to the elite and which areas of the brain are responsible for these generations, it is possible to program a radiation device designed for mental manipulation to emit rays of the same configurations to the corresponding areas of the brain. Of course, the specific type of radiation should be chosen, which could be capable to force neurons to produce nerve impulses or physically stimulate existing nerve impulses by contacting them and forcing them to flow according to the pre-programmed code. For this purpose, the selected type of radiation should be as similar to the radiation of the nerve impulses themselves as possible, so that it would be inert to them upon contact with specific nerve impulses, i.e., not causing any chemical reactions and not changing the structure and composition of the nerve impulses, and could physically push them in the desired direction. This would make it possible to control people's emotions and minds directly, forcing them to follow the orders of the elite. Another method could be the implantation of special microchips in the human brain, which would send electrical impulses of specific configurations to specific areas of the brain, provoking certain emotions, causing false memories or even artificial thoughts, which, once transferred to the area of the brain responsible for actions, would force a person to perform certain pre-programmed tasks. In this case, mind control would be carried out in a similar way as using external radiation, except that in this case, everything would be done directly by devices implanted in the brain, which could be monitored and controlled remotely. Such control would be even more effective than with radiation, as it would not be necessary to track a person's location constantly and accurately in order for the rays to reach the desired areas, because the microchip would remain in the same place in the brain throughout its entire operation. Special microchips could also be implanted to track a person's location and read his thoughts and emotions, so that it would be clear whether he was planning to engage in activities that could harm the elite in any way, and, if necessary, the elite could use certain measures to stop these activities. For example, various physical suppression tactics may be applied by secretly adding special chemicals to a person's medication or food that would harm his health, causing symptoms similar to naturally occurring diseases, or injecting pathogenic microorganisms that cause serious diseases and weaken him physically and/or psychologically to such an extent that he is no longer able to carry out activities harmful to the elite, while the doctors whom the person would turn to for help could be bribed in advance to falsify the results of health tests, indicating a false diagnosis of the disease. And in extreme cases, if it is clear that other measures may no longer be effective, destruction measures may be initiated. Before that, attempts may be made to convince people through threats to stop activities that are harmful to the elite. These microchips could be implanted directly into the brain, surgically, possibly along with erasure of the memory about the operation or in conjunction with other operations that were prescribed to that person to treat the consequences of a certain natural illness, e.g., to remove a brain tumor, using sedatives which put a person in a sleeping state, or they can be the size of nanoparticles and injected along with supposedly necessary vaccinations, or added to various food products so that after consumption, the microchips would become embedded in the brain, possibly with the help of nanorobots, which would be placed in the same product, and automatically begin to perform their functions. Therefore, if a person notices that he is having thoughts that are unusual for him, and that he is reacting to various things differently than he normally would, it is worth trying to find out the reasons for such changes in brain activity, possibly with the help of a trusted doctor, and eliminate them. Until that is done, a person should focus all his willpower on trying to resist those extraneous thoughts, unless, after careful consideration, he decides that they are more useful than his previous thoughts. But even in those cases, one should not relax too much and start trusting all other thoughts that raise suspicion that they may be artificially induced, because there may be used a such tactic where thoughts that are beneficial to the person are generated at first so that he could begin to trust them and become less motivated to check new thoughts that come to them. But in reality, those newer thoughts may be harmful to the person and could only be intended to satisfy the needs of certain members of the elite. Therefore, all such unnatural, artificial thoughts should be checked and evaluated separately, and if there is a suspicion that they may be harmful, efforts should be made to block them. One way to do this is to focus as much attention as possible on a person's original thought that naturally arise in that particular situation, or to direct his attention to some external stimulus present at that moment and in that environment that causes the strongest possible emotions or otherwise forces the brain to work as intensely as possible, analyzing the information received about that stimulus. If there is no stimulus with such characteristics in the environment at that moment, in that case a person can try to create one in his imagination or use a memory aspect that evokes strong emotions. Because the more the brain is overloaded with work, the more attention will be diverted and the weaker the influence of those extraneous thoughts will be. However, if these extraneous thoughts are caused not by microchips or other physical devices implanted in the brain, but, for example, by the effects of certain radiation, then doctors may not be able to find the cause of these extraneous thoughts. In such case, only special devices mounted on the head that can react to various types of radiation and detect certain unnatural disturbances, suspicious increases and decreases in radiation intensity, frequency changes, etc., could help. Then it would be necessary to find out which areas of the brain are affected by these disturbances and find ways to block the radiation so that it no longer reaches the brain, possibly by using a coating of material impervious to that type of radiation around the brain, or by using a special device to emit radiation of the same type and of the same or greater intensity, pointed in the opposite direction.